These aren't the games we're talking about today. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you a pretty good sense of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But this is our doctorate level series. This is where we revisit a subgenre that we've already explored. We take a look back at what we already talked about, and then we add a 4th new doctorate level selection. Something that's maybe a little deeper cut or lesser known, or sometimes it's just newer, but another movie to add to the conversation about that particular subgenre. And today, the subgenre we're revisiting is the mind games horror movies. And when we talked about mind games in our previous video, we admitted right up front that it's a little bit kind of nebulous what we're talking about there. And we tried to explain it a little bit better than just, I know it when I see it, which I did actually say in that video. But what we really came down on was it's a kind of movie where a big focus of the plot or the idea of the movie is playing a mind game on a character or characters in the movie and or playing a mind game on the audience, oftentimes both. And that's what we were trying to look at in terms of explaining what mind game movie meant, and it's what we illustrated in the 3 selections that we talked about in that video. I felt like all 3 of them did a pretty good job of explaining or showing, illustrating mind games being played. So why don't we go ahead and just recap what we talked about in those videos, that video right now. The first mind game horror movie we talked about was April Fool's Day. And even at the time, I admitted it was a challenge to talk a little bit about April Fool's Day and how it is a mind game without spoiling the movie, because that's the big crux of this movie. It's a holiday-themed slasher, just like so many of them in the 80s were, but it's notorious and it's endured in reputation because of its controversial ending. Some people really love that controversial ending. Some people really hate that controversial ending. And that ending dovetails really specifically into the mind game aspects of this movie, not only on the characters, but also on the audience, which I think is part of why it rubs some people the wrong way. Again, I'm not going to spoil it. I didn't spoil it then. I'm not going to spoil it now. It's fun enough as a slasher on its own. It's got some fun enough kills. If you like slashers, it's a pretty good time. But really, it's that ending that recontextualizes everything and makes it to be a much more noteworthy and memorable movie, and one that, you know, has endured to this time and was worthy of being mentioned on the horror movie syllabus. The next mind game horror movie that we looked at was Kill List. And Kill List is admittedly a little lesser known movie, but it was one that has quite a reputation as being a surprising and crazy and shocking and upsetting movie, violent and taboo. And technically this is true, but I think I even said this in the video that for me, it fell a little bit short of that reputation. It didn't really quite blow me away in terms of being shocking and surprising and violent and taboo and whatnot. It had it in there, but for me, it really was like a really intense family drama. In fact, the movie starts off rather slowly and it picks up steam as it goes on. And then it does go into some really crazy places. I'm not going to try to undersell that, but the family drama and then where that drama winds up is, to me, the crux of where it goes. And yeah, it's another one of these movies that's playing a mind game on its character, but it's also playing a mind game on you as the audience member. So that's one of the reasons why I wound up adding it kind of as a late selection, I think, to the mind game subgenre, because it really does have a reputation that, while not completely earned, still is a really exemplary example of the mind game subgenre. And the last mind game horror movie that we talked about was Compliance. And Compliance is a tough one, man, because the mind game being played here isn't just on the audience, really, but it's a real life mind game that was played. This is a movie that's based on a shocking true story. And I had to point out in the video that this movie has a lot of crazy stuff that happens in it that is actually true. These are things that actually happened to this young woman. There's actually a series of women. They boil it down to one in the movie, but all these crazy things that happen that are hard to believe. And you're thinking, no way, there's no way this would happen. But it really, really did. This person messing with somebody in a really awful and disturbing way that just makes you angry as a viewer. And it makes you even angrier when you see that it was real and that it actually happened. This is buoyed by some fantastic performances by Dreama Walker and Dowd, who is always awesome. And they are making this movie relatable and believable because they're so convincing in their performances that you will go along with the idea that this stuff could actually happen. And then when you find out that it actually is real, if you do the research on it, it blows your mind because you're just like, it seems absurd. It seems shocking, but this real life mind game, it was something I had to talk about on the mind game subgenre because it's just so shocking and disturbing. And I'm still mad about it. I'm still mad about what happened in that movie. So that was our selections for the mind game subgenre. But of course, now we're going to add a fourth doctorate level selection. Our doctorate level selection for the mind game subgenre is Exam. Now, Exam came out in 2009 and is admittedly probably not the most well-known or famous of movies. It's a little bit more of a deeper cut, which again is what we try to do here on the doctorate level selection. But this is one directed by Stuart Hazeldine, and as far as I can tell, it was his first feature film. And it's a pretty interesting one, even though it may not have the reputation or the widespread notoriety. I think it's worth noting here, so we're going to get into it in just a second. But first, if you haven't seen it before, the movie's about 8 candidates for a mysterious, high-powered job, and they are brought into the same room for the final round of interviewing, and they are told by the instructor that they will have to answer one question in the time given to them, and that's going to be determining who's going to get the job. The thing is, each one of them are identified by candidate number 1 through 8, and they're given a blank piece of paper, and they have these rules: don't damage your paper, don't try to leave the room, and don't try to communicate with the guard or the instructor. And that's all they know, and they're trying to figure out what they're supposed to do with that information, and hijinks abound. And the movie is doing some really cool things right up front because it's got a really interesting, intriguing premise for a very grounded psychological thriller. You've got these people, and they're all smart, they're all overachievers, they're all ambitious, and they're all put in this room together, and they're trying to figure out, based on very scant instructions, what they're supposed to do. And you, as an audience member, are also trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. So you're playing the mind game along with them, and that's a lot of fun. And it's got a really cool recipe for success as a psychological thriller. You've got a confined space, you've got strong personalities, and the tension is building up and ratcheting up as this clock is ticking down, and people start to clash, right? Now, it's interesting because they do have this clock, and it feels arbitrary. It feels there just to add that tension to the movie. But I would say, without spoiling things, the clock actually does wind up being somewhat more important as the movie goes on. But I did feel early on, I was like, oh, that's kind of an odd thing to have that clock for no good reason. Why? Why is there a clock there? But it does keep things moving and keep things tense because this movie does a really good job of getting right to it. It jumps right into the scenario really quickly, gets right to it. It's a very quickly paced movie. It doesn't waste time. There's not really any fat on this movie. You've got these people, they're trying to figure things out. You've been given the same instructions they've been given, which are scant, and you don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. And when they're coming up with ideas, it's kind of like when you're coming up with ideas, you're like, oh, I would try this. And they try it. And sometimes they come up with ideas you didn't think of, and maybe you come up with an idea that they don't think of. It's fun to be kind of, or feel like you're being involved in that, or kind of wrapped up in that. And you're with all these people, again, in a confined space. Honestly, the way it's staged, the way it's set up, it could be a play, and apparently it was a play. There was I think in Europe, in London, it's an English film. It was done as a play for a little while, and it seems like it's set up for that. It has very much of a 12 Angry Men feel to it. It's not 12 Angry Men, let me be clear about that. I'm just saying the setup feels that way because it's largely people in a room having conversations, trying to convince each other of what they should do. And it works, man. It really does sell pretty well, this situation and the stakes behind it. And it's interesting because you don't really know what the stakes are. You're aware that it's for a job. And so it doesn't seem like that big a deal. But the lengths these people are willing to go through to get this job are intriguing. It really makes for you to wonder why they'd care so much to make this job work. And the movie will kind of start to explore that as a mystery throughout the film. I obviously won't spoil it for you here, but it adds to the tension in the movie when you're trying to figure out they don't even really necessarily know what they're in for. So it's great. You're as in the dark in this movie as the characters are, and it works really well. And there's these added layers of it too. There's the different characters having different backgrounds. It's kind of a diverse group of people, and that kind of feeds into the plot as well. And honestly, the acting is mostly solid. There's some really good people. There's one person who's not great, the psychiatrist. She is pretty bad, not bad enough to ruin it. She doesn't screw everything up and really, derail the film, but she is noticeably not a good actor compared to everybody else. And everybody else is either good or really good in the movie, which is important because again, the conversations are what's driving it. But they have these other ideas too, like backstories of the characters, which feed into the revealing motivations of the characters. And there's like this mysterious pandemic that's been happening, and that seems to be feeding into maybe something about what the job is about or what the company that's offering the job is about. And that pandemic becomes a plot point too. And in 2009 probably didn't mean so much, but post 2020 means a lot more, much more relatable at this point. So that's interesting also that this movie has aged extremely well in that regard. All of the ideas of the competitiveness of these people and what they're willing to do to each other to get this job is fascinating. And you start putting yourself in different characters' shoes. Like, would I react like this character or would I react like this character? And what would that mean for my ability to not only get the job, but to survive this increasingly tense and increasingly dangerous situation? It works really, really well. I like this movie quite a bit, in no small part because I really, really love the ending, which I'm not going to spoil, but this whole movie is set up with them being presented with a riddle, and the way that riddles work into this movie, especially at the end, works for me so well. I thoroughly enjoy this movie. I don't want to tell you much more about that because I don't want to spoil it for you, of course, because the mystery is a big part of it, but I would say definitely check this movie out. I feel like a lot of people haven't seen it. It may not be on a lot of people's radars, and it's unfortunate. It deserves more eyes. That's why I picked it for the Doctorate Level. I'm a real big fan of this movie. It's just a simple psychological thriller that's, again, pretty much in one location, and it has very low research. It's basically a low-budget movie, but it's done really, really well. All the execution of it, from the writing to the direction to the acting, it all works well enough to really put you in that room and make you feel good. So, and good as in, like, if you enjoy a good mind game, because it's a really good mind game movie. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. And of course, let me know what you think in the comments, because I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it. So that's our doctorate level selection for the mind game subgenre. But of course, I've got an extra credit selection for you because this is one that I also wanted to put on there, but I put exam instead. But this one deserves just as much attention as exam. And this one, our extra credit selection, is the Stanford Prison Experiment. Now, the Stanford Prison Experiment is a dramatization that came out in 2015. It's a movie of a actual real-life 1971 study done by Professor Philip Zimbardo, and it was a controversial study, and this is a movie version of this, telling the story, directed by Kyle Patrick Alvarez. And when I look him up, he's got lots of credits, but I think this is the thing that he's probably best known for. And it's a somewhat noteworthy movie, in no small part because of the noteworthy subject matter. But we're going to get into all of that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is a dramatization of a real-life 1971 study done at Stanford University by this Professor Zimbardo of taking 24 male students and assigning them the role of guard or prisoner and locking them up and pretending they're in a prison and seeing how their psychological adjustment to these roles would impact them, and also exploring why the study got cut dramatically short because of how badly things went as the hijinks kicked in. And we'll go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie too much. But this movie, like I said, it's based on real life. So there's an actual story out there, and it's a pretty notorious one. This study was very controversial. The scientific methods employed, or maybe not employed, in doing this study have come under fire for years and years and years after this. And the merits of the study and the results that it achieved are also very much up for debate. But what's not really up for debate is how shocking the things that happened in this study were. So the movie starts off fairly easy, right? Like the students are playing it like it's a game, right? They're like, the guards acting tough and the prisoners are giving some sass and stuff like that. but things escalate. The natural escalation of this stuff as these people sink into their roles is very believable in the movie because it happened in real life too. But you can see it. You can see where it comes from and how people start to sit into these roles and how it starts to really damage the prisoner's psyche and really kind of just like reveal stuff about the guards. It's wild. And the study was supposed to go on for like 2 weeks and it got cut after 6 days. And so that tells you right there that it was some shocking stuff. And like when you watch the movie, you're going to believe that it's been, amped up or whatever for dramatic purposes. But no, the stuff that's being shown in the movie is very accurate. It's very true to what happened in the study. I've done some research on the actual study itself. It's pretty shocking. Like the stuff that's in there that they show about the prisoners kind of losing a sense of time because they have no windows, they have no clocks, they have nothing there. The way that they are being forced to wear these smocks that are kind of like dresses and being feminized, and the layout of the prison, which is actually just like a hallway in the basement of one of the school's buildings, but the way they've set it up so that they've got 3 cots to a room, they're locked in these rooms, and there's like a little closet they use as the hole, and the costumes of the guards and how they're all dressed up the same in these tan outfits, and they all wear sunglasses to kind of like hide their eyes and make them more like faceless and like monolithic and stuff. All of this stuff is very accurate to the real study. When you see pictures of it and stuff like that, you see they've nailed this, and they've got the different roles the different characters played pretty darn well. From what I understand, they've mirrored the actors to these roles really, really well. And the actors are by and large great in this movie. There's a lot of recognizable names and faces here. Billy Crudup playing the professor. He's kind of the big star in the movie. You've got Ezra Miller playing one of the most notorious of the prisoners. Ty Sheridan playing another prisoner. Olivia Thirlby playing the professor's girlfriend, and she's very important in the movie. Kara Gilchrist, Nelson Ellis, God Rest His Soul. Like lots of recognizable names, and everybody here is doing really, really good work. So that's important because it's making it feel believable. Again, because it's so unbelievable. The stuff that happens and the stuff that they do to torment and basically psychologically torture these kids is shocking and hard to believe, but it really happened. And the actors help convey that. And it helps you to believe how this would actually happen. Because when you read about it, you're like, there's no way somebody would do this. Why would somebody let somebody do this to them? But when you see it in the movie, it makes so much more sense. And they did a really good job of capturing that. And, it's interesting because I said Billy Crudup playing the professor is the kind of the star of the movie. And it's interesting because I feel like the movie does a good job of showing him to be, very standoffish and showing kind of the glee he sees in some of the abuse that's happening. But then it also kind of shows him in somewhat of a sympathetic light at the end. It kind of exonerates him a little bit, but I'm not sure if that's really what it does. It's hard to say, and I don't want to, spoil too much of the movie, but it's hard to say at the end what the movie's feelings about the professor are. It's complicated. And I think that's true because it is complicated in real life. He has spent years and decades, frankly, defending this study amongst a lot of criticism and controversy. And it's interesting because the source story is so fascinating. This movie will make you want to go and check out the original story. And there are other movies. I think there's a documentary and there's a German film that kind of takes inspiration from this. And there's a couple like TV shows that take inspiration from this. This study's so well known that it's kind of done a lot of different, done in a lot of different media or influenced a lot of different media. But this is the movie that really captures the study as accurately and realistically as possible. And shining a light on this study even years and years and decades later by a quality film that's done really well and very tense, superb acting. It really lets you call into question the appropriateness of doing stuff like this and the value of it. This experiment led to a lot of reforms in terms of how experiments are performed. So that is a good thing, but it's very easy to see stuff like this still happening even today. And so I think this movie still has a lot of relevance, even though it's about something that happened almost over 50 years ago. So it's definitely one that if you're not familiar with the study, this is a good place to start. Check out this movie. And even if you are familiar with the study, seeing this movie and seeing how well it's depicted is a really cool treat. It's a really good example of how you can make a movie or a dramatization of real life events and make it incredibly compelling while not deviating so far away from the facts in order to have it fit a 3-act narrative structure. This movie did it really, really well. It's a great example of that. And it is one of the most shocking real life mind games that we've ever seen, and it was done on purpose for educational studies. So definitely a fascinating movie. High recommend from me. Check it out if you're not familiar with any of it. If you haven't seen it before, again, of course, let me know what you think. But it's a wonderful, wonderful movie. But it's a real hard watch too, so be aware of that. So that's going to do it for our revisiting of the mind games subgenre. I do think that we've got some gems of movies for you to check out. Again, let me know what you think of them, but both of them are ones that you may not have seen because they're not the most famous movies, but they're definitely worth your time. So give them your time, please. And now it's time to take on a Horror Trip Pursuit card. As always, I like to read one of these cards, one of these questions on camera, and then try to answer it. And since we're talking about mind games, we're definitely going with the psychological category on the card, of course, right? So here's our question today. What is the name of the haunted house in 1963's The Haunting? Okay, so this is like the second 1960s movie question that we've gotten in a row, and that's cool, but like it is out of the scope for the horror movie syllabus. We do 1970 and on, so this movie's a little less for that. But I am familiar with the movie, and more importantly, I am familiar with the source material and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this. And honestly, like a lot of you, because this source material is well known. I think that there's enough adaptations that you probably do know the answer to this, or you could maybe guess it if you really thought. But if you don't know the answer to this off the top of your head, you might be able to deduce it based on just kind of thinking about like haunting movies in general, and maybe you can kind of come up with that way. That's my one clue to you. The other thing I'd say is that the way I know the answer to this question, or at least I'm pretty sure. If I'm wrong, I'm going to be embarrassed about this whole thing. But I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this. And if I'm right, the way I know about this, like the way it like leaps to my mind easily, I've talked about that multiple times on this channel. So if you're a big avid fan of the channel, what have I been talking about? Like, like over the years, I don't know. That's probably a lame clue because I've talked about a lot of things. Over 200 videos on this channel. Shameless plug, I suppose. But I've prattled on long enough. Time for you to lock in a guess about what the name of the house is. So lock in your guess. I've got mine locked in. Lock in yours. Okay, ready? Okay. My guess is Hill House. The house is called Hill House, like the haunting of Hill House, right? So here's my checking the card, and it says Hill House. Hill House. So yeah, like this thing, haunting a Hill House, the haunting, like all of that, like so many different versions of the source material. So it's pretty well known, pretty famous. So that's where my mind went immediately. Of course, that Mike Flanagan series, Haunting of Hill House, is what I was talking about because I love that. I think I feel like I revisit that so often. So that was when it was easy for me. Was it easy for you? Did you get it? And if you didn't get it, what did you guess? I'd like to hear wrong answers because I think they're funny. So let me know that. And let me know if there's any other mind game horror movies that you think I should check out. Maybe it's something I haven't seen before. And if it is, I'll add it to the list and maybe we'll do a video on it in the future. But until then, I'm just going to say, class dismissed.